you please welcome to the stage Brad Deflin.
Thanks, John. Thank you. Good morning. It's nice to be back today with the Total Wealth Symposium and all of you, seeing a lot of friends after the last couple of years. So we have 40 minutes today, and if you've heard me before, you know I can talk fast sometimes, a lot to get through. And I always warn the audience that you will probably leave with more questions than you came in with. And that's okay. I think that's a sign of success because we're around, we can answer questions, and we can get more detailed. But first, the opening slide, even without words, I think might be one of the most meaningful and important slides of the entire presentation because it very much is the message of today. We are in a new age for humanity. It is the new digital age. And anytime humanity goes through a change at the level of a new age, there's a lot of friction. There are a lot of issues around survival, much less success. And that's what we're seeing today. Think about the transition to the industrial age and some of Nietzsche's writings and how that was punctuated, frankly, probably by World War I. And the transition the globe had to go through from being primarily an agrarian-based society to something that was very different. What we're going through today and we're witnessing is of that level of importance and of historical impact as we are just in the very early innings, the very first innings of this new digital age. And most of the friction and the stresses that we're feeling today are very much around privacy and cybercrime, which is the topic for the presentation. So let's see if we can get through this. First of all, as I was preparing for this and thinking about my relationship with Total Wealth Symposium and sort of taking a walk down memory lane, if you will, it was back in 2015 when I had my first invitation and joined a lot of you in the Bahamas. And it was notable to me, I had started the company in 2013 based on a lot of data and some vision, but frankly, nobody cared about cyber risk and cybersecurity, certainly not individuals and investors and families and even small businesses. Nobody cared. But we did notice, and I had been a subscriber well before this relationship with Banyan Hill and the Sovereign Society and the Total Wealth Symposium, that Ted Bauman and others did get it. And we were asked to attend, sort of coincidentally. I was subscribing, I was reading the newsletters, but I hadn't really reached out. But they had noticed some work that we were doing and invited us in. And it was, honestly, it was very notable because they were early, they were visionaries, and they understood, it's all about, with the Total Wealth Symposium, risk, return, value, and asset protection. And this absolutely, when you think about cyber risk and cybercrime, applies directly to all of those things. I think it's very hard to talk about any risk today without addressing cyber risk. So we were back in the Bahamas, and then it was all about, I had just come out of JP Morgan. I was a senior executive at JP Morgan working on a lot of data and figuring out that things were really changing when it came to risk. And at JP Morgan, it was always about risk management for ultra high net worth families. And it occurred to us that cyber risk was transforming a lot of mainstream life and was going to do that tremendously in the future. And so we talked in 2015 about the personalization of cyber risk. I called it the democratization of cyber risk. That term doesn't quite land on a lot of people, so we adjusted it to the personalization of cyber risk. And the point around that was that we were very quickly moving from what had for 25 years been very much an institutional problem, right? It was the IT department's problem. It was the Pentagon's problem. It was the intelligence community's problem. It was a military problem. And it was the black hat sort of risk. Cyber espionage, hacktivism, cyber warfare, very much an institutional and enterprise-based risk. But what we noticed we were going through remarkably quickly was a transformation to include a personal aspect of risk. The institutional side is still there, and in previous presentations, if you've seen them, and I recognize a lot of faces, we use a pie chart to show how quickly cybercrime for profit has gone from a very skinny piece of the pie in overall breaches to now a dominant piece of the pie, but the pie is much bigger. So cyber warfare, cyber espionage, very big black hat type problems, very big still, but the huge growth in more the personalization side has really sort of overwhelmed the pie. The pie is much bigger, and now over 80% of all cyber breaches are around cybercrime for profit, not the traditional issues as we came to know them. And so I had to go back to this slide because it shows some of the vision that was involved that the Total Wealth Symposium brought to bear. In 2015, I said, based on this data, based on these powerful trends that are bankable, becoming very predictable with very high probabilities, we can expect some things in the next couple of years that are going to be really different. Let's start with clouds, right? Dispersing our information into the ether, and clouds are here to stay, and our information is distributed all over the place. And that would include, that would include the Internet of Things, where everything, the IoT, the Internet of Things, a term for the future to know, would mean everything was going to become connected to the internet because chips are so powerful, so inexpensive, and the value to making anything like a car or a pacemaker or a television or anything connected to the internet was something that was smart, context aware, and collecting the most valuable commodity on the planet today, information, was a trend that we were here to say, was here to stay. So by 2020, estimates are all over the board, but someplace between 50 billion and 100 billion things are going to be connected to the internet, which are just going to exacerbate the challenges that are around this. And of course, we've seen that really come to fruition over the last couple of years. We spoke about cryptocurrencies. And a lot of folks in 2015 had never heard of a Bitcoin. Many folks still today do not understand cryptocurrencies. It's a complicated matter. But it does mean that a lot of things are changing when it comes to criminal profit motive, because now you have loot, if you will, that is portable, liquid, and anonymous. It's like the electronic version of bearer bonds, if you remember, right? Very valuable in pushing the criminal motive. And you have traditional criminal cartels and syndicates, as well as new ones around the world, that are re-engineering for cybercrime. Why would you smuggle cocaine or rob banks when you can be in the business where your loot is portable, anonymous, and liquid, immediately liquid? And the supply and demand factors coming into cybercrime, pushing cryptocurrencies, we're absolutely, of course, seeing today. And we said, this is going to impact a lot of different issues, and bad actors and sovereign countries, whether it be China and Russia and some of the others, are going to use stolen information to satisfy their agendas, whether it's chaos, pandemonium, social unrest, or what have you. And of course, all of these things are coming to fruition, and it was going to happen. It's hard to see, but in the back, you see a line, a graph, if you will, at exponential rates, because technology moves at exponential rates, not 2% a year, not 5% a year, not 10% a year, 100% a year. And so the change was going to be whiplashing, and we had to get ready for it. So then we were invited back in 2016, and now we were in beautiful Bermuda. And we had left 2015 talking about the personalization of cyber risk, raising awareness, educating, informing, scaring, because we have to shock some people into understanding this. And a lot of it is kind of scary. But 2016's theme was a little bit different. It was around the commoditization of these solutions. And let me explain what I mean by that. Technology, again, advancing at these exponential rates, using clouds, using artificial intelligence, using very powerful software. Suddenly, IT security, and by the way, very hot industry, so a lot of new capital, creating great innovation in the space, using this new technology, was going from being, the white-coated lab technicians in rooms full of hot hardware to an app that everybody could use on their mobile phones, on their tablets, on their laptops and home computers without IT expertise. It was very much software defined, and we should get comfortable with that because awareness and education are not enough when it comes to cybercrime. You do have to use tools to counteract the tools that the hackers are using. They are very much scientific about the tools that they're using to increase the sophistication of their attacks. We, as potential victims, have to do the same and come up the curve and use equally as sophisticated tools to counter the attacks. But the good news, so now we're talking empowering, not scaring, but empowering people and audience members with tools that they would need to not only have more awareness and be more understanding, have higher levels of understanding in terms of what was going on, but to actually have things that worked, commercial grade type solutions that were developed in mission critical environments right on your iPhone, right on your Android, right on your laptop. And so our presentation was around introducing these solutions to audience members. Here we did a workshop on introducing VPNs. And I will say that most of that audience, before they stepped in the room, probably couldn't even spell VPN at that point, much no really understand what it was or the value that it brought in encrypting their lives so that they could be on the internet invisibly. Banking, shopping, browsing, emailing, everything encrypted to be invisible on the internet. What a value that is. So now, 2015, awareness, education, information, fear. 2016, tools, technology, coming up the curve, empowerment. And now let's try to come forward a little bit to 2017, again, just looking behind a little bit. So 2013 is when people first started to take note that this means something, when the Wall Street Journal said, this is a $100 billion problem. And that, that hit the tape and everybody said, wow, $100 billion, big problem. By the time we showed up in the Bahamas with the Total Wealth Symposium, Lloyd's is talking about it at $400 billion. Now notice the pattern of these numbers. The story is in the pattern of the numbers. A year later, Microsoft and the World Economic Forum says this is a multi-trillion dollar problem. The numbers are moving up exponentially. They're growing at a pace that we are not used to through all of our human existence. It's now the digital age. Things are very, very different. And now, most recently, a very credible source called Cybersecurity Ventures is coining it at $6 trillion by 2021. Mind-boggling numbers. The data, the figures, that's not the message I'm trying to transmit. What I'm trying to say is that this is an issue that is growing faster and at a scope and scale like nothing we've ever seen before, and we're still just getting started. So now, here we are, 2017, we're in beautiful Hollywood, Florida, and where do we go from here? And I know we have a lot of new faces in the audience too, so I thought that that sort of walk down memory lane might be helpful to sort of bring us up to speed, if you will. And I think we can punctuate that with one word, where we are right now, right? Equifax. Equifax. Now, truth be told, there's not a whole lot new in the Equifax breach. It actually happened earlier than many of you might suspect, beginning in 2016. The nature of the breach, there's really nothing unusual about it. Maybe the sense that we have so much trust in these agencies and they hold so much of our most intimate information, right? What was the color of our first car? They know, right? What bank held the mortgage on your first home? They know. They know all of these elements about you, and it's stored in the cloud by unaccountable people for indeterminate periods of time. And think about what they did with that. They lost it to hackers, not because it was a technology problem, not because they didn't have the latest, greatest security systems, but because they simply weren't with it in terms of their culture corporately, in terms of the individuals that were responsible for these things, and they did something as stupid, frankly, as not keeping their software up to date. That's what caused the Equifax breach. They hadn't updated their Apache servers with software that had been issued months and months earlier, with great warning messages and advisory messages to do it. And the sort of corporate culture, sort of the human component failed. And hackers, when there's a known issue around a software upgrade, they know who isn't upgrading because they're scanning the stuff, they're collecting their information, and they are then targeting those vulnerabilities, and that applies all the way down to all of us. Are we updating our Windows software? Are we updating our Adobe software, our Java software? It's almost a full-time job anymore. There are solutions that will do that for you, and we talk about that more specifically tomorrow in the workshop. But these are the kinds of issues that culturally and from a human standpoint, we still have a long way to go. And I think Equifax, while the brand we're going to focus on, and we should, frankly, is really just indicative of a much broader problem, because you name it, and whether it be Social Security, the IRS, the Office of Management and Budget, you name it, they've all suffered from equally as almost unacceptable breaches. Again, it's not because they weren't deploying the best science, it's because they weren't thinking about the new digital age. I use a story out of personal experience to explain how fast things are changing and how different things are. Between 1998 and 2008, I ran Lehman Brothers in the state of Florida, both retail and institutional businesses. And we have a lot of stories about Lehman Brothers. And we have a lot of stories about culture and people with Lehman Brothers. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. I will say, regardless of all those stories, it was a collection of some enormously intelligent people, very smart people. Some of it was maligned. Again, different stories, but when it comes to just mental horsepower, very, very smart people. And everybody there wanted to be the smartest guy in the room. It was enormously competitive. But there was one guy that was always the smartest guy in the room. He was the smartest guy at the firm, and nobody argued about it. And I'm going to give you his name because it's all over the press. And the story I'm going to tell you, you can Google and find it for yourself. I'm not coming, I don't think I'm getting too far over my skis. His name was Robert Millard. In 2007, the year before the bank went down with history's largest bankruptcy, Lehman Brothers paid him $52 million for the year. 1 year's work, $52 million. The number 2 paid employee was the CEO, Dick Fuld. He made $40 million. So it begs the question, who was this guy and what did he do for this bank to determine he was worth $52 million, $12 million more than number 2, the CEO? And he wasn't even in the annual report. He wasn't in the C-suite, right? He was the proprietary trader. He had discretion over Lehman Brothers' $100 billion balance sheet. He would scour the planet every day, looking at securities all over the world, evaluating their risk and their return, and whether he should go long or short, how much he could leverage that trade for profit, and had the $100 billion balance sheet at his discretion to do that. And he was so smart, call him a master of the universe risk manager, that he did that so predictably and so consistently, the bank paid him $52 million in 2007, okay? So master of the universe risk manager, as I like to say. Fast forward 2016, Mr. Millard and his wife are buying a $20 million apartment in Manhattan, New York, and he's transacting it over his AOL email account. Master of the universe risk manager. And it was intercepted. The transaction had been monitored by hackers. They knew who the buyers were, they knew who the sellers were, they knew the closing terms, they knew the financial institutions, and they were skulking in the background like they do in the real estate industry all day, every day. Again, a whole nother story what's going on in residential real estate sales. And his broker was also on a free email account. I don't recall whether it was Gmail or Yahoo or AOL or one of the others. So very easy for hackers to monitor and skulk and collect this information and engineer an interception, if you will, right at the right time. So when he was ready for the closing statement, when he was ready for sending his $2 million down payment, the email came in, everybody's name was right, everything was exactly the way he thought it would be. He got it on his AOL email account. He pushed to send and wire $2 million. It's gone. All right? It was diverted to a bank in Hong Kong, immediately converted to digital currencies. There is no scene of the crime. There are no forensics to speak of. He is a very litigious person, imagine that, and there's nobody to sue, right? So here is a master of the universe, risk manager, tops in the game, yet things have changed so fast in this new digital age, he missed his #1 risk today. Went right over his head. He's out $2 million. It just happened a few months ago to a New York State Supreme Court judge, right? Another very smart, very engaged person doing a residential real estate transaction. It was a $1 million initial deposit down payment on the real estate transaction. Gone. Never to be found again. This is how fast things are changing and how dramatic it is. So Equifax is punctuating it, and really what's different with Equifax as much as anything is the media is really paying attention to it. But this stuff, if you saw what we see every single day, it just boggles the mind. So while we were very sort of polite in the past, personalization of cyber risk, right? Empowering with cyber, there's no room for that anymore. So when working with the organizers for the symposium this year, we said we have to be a lot stronger with our message. You know, we have to almost shock people in understanding what's happening. So this year it's kill cybercrime, right? Don't be one of the victims. I mean, that's where we are today. There's really no more time to be polite and nice and kind of casual about the issue. So that's why we sort of took that particular moniker this year. And so, but again, Equifax is just a brand that the media is focusing on. So on my way here on Wednesday, I guess it was, 20th was Wednesday, right? I said, let's just see what happens today. As an indication, as evidence that this stuff is all day, every day, right? So it starts at 7:45 in the morning. CNBC says the number of devastating cyber attacks is surging and likely to get a lot worse. We have not peaked. We have not climaxed in this. We're not even close to it. We're, again, in the very early innings, up 164% exponential rates of change compared to 2016. But here is the statement that tells me we still don't get it. Governments around the world are introducing legislation which will force more companies to disclose data breaches. So what? You know, and this stuff, lots of what's being disclosed was found out a year ago or has been happening for a year and they're just finding out now. So yes, our headlines are going to be full of this stuff and these disclosures, but that doesn't help any of us in terms of what do we do about it? And honestly, that answer and that question is not being asked anywhere often enough. At the federal level, at the local level, at the private level, at the public level. We have a long way to go as a society to really understand this. And I come back to the Total Wealth Symposium, again, as a very early visionary in applying it to risk, return, asset protection, and us. That's the most important piece. And so then a little bit later in the morning, 10 a.m. now, Wired, an excellent resource, by the way, for anybody that's interested in these things. It says a new group of Iranian hackers is linked to destructive malware. This has to do with the CC Cleaner software. Who has CC Cleaner? Right? Very popular. I see it on a lot of machines. There's a free free version, always be suspect of free, right? Have you ever noticed every 25-year-old billionaire in the country is giving you something for free on the internet? Right? I mean, there's nothing for free. And what they're doing is they're arbitraging our lack of understanding and respect for privacy and personal information with their deep understanding. And so they're giving you something for free, like a Facebook account, an Instagram account, a Gmail account, but you have absolutely agreed that in exchange for that, you give up everything. All details that you do are now theirs, held in the cloud by unaccountable people for indeterminate periods of time. It will never end well. So be very suspect of anything free. But what they're doing in this case, and we're going to see a lot more of, is that they're starting at the software end. So when you buy some of this free software, CC Cleaner in this example, which a lot of people love and has really done some pretty good things for people in terms of optimizing their computer, it was a very good product, but they're embedding the malware, the bad stuff, the viruses, into that so that when you buy it online or sign up for the free version online, you are essentially injecting it into your technology yourself. And it sits there, and it skulks, and it collects, and they're very patient. Estimates are anywhere from 100 days to almost 400 days between the time when you first are under attack in terms of being monitored and the skulking activity, and when they actually do the attack to breach and create some sort of consequence, some sort of harm. 100 to 400 days. Why? They're collecting all these things, right? Your mother's first name, the street you grew up on, all these things. And they're engineering it. And these are not actuarials in a room with a green eye shade. This is powerful software that they're using that will tell them what is what and fill in the fields for them. And suddenly 10,000 email addresses come down and they say, this is the guy, these are the people that didn't update their software and are using these things, and now we're ready to go in and attack them. Incredibly sophisticated, and they're not computer scientists. They are not necessarily math geniuses, or they're simply buying very cheap, very powerful software and employing it to do their deeds these days. So cybercrime as a service is another trend where you will see in the Ukraine and Russia, where, by the way, it's not illegal to hack people out of their country. It's only illegal to hack in their country. It is not illegal in Russia to hack outside of the country. There are whole neighborhoods that have rooms this size full of computers, and they say, come on in, sit down, here's 10,000 stolen Yahoo email addresses, here's the bad stuff, the viruses, everything you do is encrypted, don't worry. Every dollar you get, you keep 60%, you give us 40%. There are entire neighborhoods that are built like this from a socioeconomic basis. And so, that was 10 a.m. Wednesday, and then, you know, by the end of the day, the Wall Street Journal, and this is a really big deal, especially for this room, and this is just a day I picked randomly on my way here. It says at 11:10 on Wednesday, the SEC, you probably saw this, discloses that Edgar, right, the corporate filing system, when you want to go in and get information, was hacked in 2016. And it may allow trading that profited from non-public information, the regulator says. My point in this one is not only that these things are happening every day, and Equifax just happens to be something the media is leaning on, it's a very big deal though, is that this is now an existential risk, right? An existential risk. I remember thinking about that word when the federal government was saying terrorism is not an existential risk. And I thought, existential, I remember that word, I know what that means, you know. So I'm borrowing that word after realizing how wrong they were about that. Cyber risk is an existential risk. It doesn't go away when you leave the office, right? It is with you at home, at the coffee shop, on the road, in the hotel, at the airport. It doesn't go away. It's 24/7. It is an existential risk. It's even now affecting, potentially legitimacy of trading and trading patterns and market influences. And I thought that was relevant to this room. Brandon, this is a very short video. All right, super short. I don't think there's any audio. And this is going to just illustrate the existential nature of cyber risk today. We're going to run it twice, so let's do the first one first. Keep an eye on the homeless guy. He's not really homeless, but keep an eye on him in this video. All right, and what you see is bank account information and personal information being collected by this homeless guy with this $29 Radio Shack unit. Here he's now dressed up as a businessman, and he's doing it on the subway. So there is everybody on the network doing their banking, browsing, shopping, and he's slurping all that information in real time, whether it be on the sidewalk or in the subway. Want to run it again, Brendan, please? So that then his powerful software can sort and sift and find out the good stuff, the passwords, the bank accounts with some cash. Maybe you're moving some money, your eye's going to be off the ball, excuse me. Again, these are very inexpensive technology devices that can be bought on the internet by anybody, anywhere. I think they're about 30 bucks. And just start slurping this up. By the way, with a VPN, that's not going to happen. All right, but that's the nature of this risk today. Anytime you are on the internet, you should suspect that unless you're protected, your information is being gathered for the sake of being used against you. That's just a fact. And so this was a punctuating moment, wasn't it? May 6th, the annual Warren Buffett Fest, right? Love Fest in Omaha, where all the shareholders show up and bow to the great capitalist. And of course, every year at this shareholders meeting, somebody says, Warren, you know, like you were doing with Ted, you know, where's the risk? Is it time? Should we sell now? Where's the risk? What's happening? And he responded, with Bill Gates at his right side, right away, without even a beat, the number one risk for mankind, he's talking all of mankind, is cyber attacks. So, I heard Jeff Yasteen on yesterday, you know, talking about the fundamentals, and I know investors think in terms of fundamentals as you should, right? Any practice, any discipline, any talent, any craft, you come back to the fundamentals. And so we've created fundamentals, and we're going to dive into that into detail tomorrow in the time that we have allotted, because there are answers, there are solutions. Like some things you can do to hedge in the markets, you can do a lot to meaningfully mitigate this risk. No risk can be eliminated, let's face it. We don't put on our seatbelt because we think we're eliminating the risk of dying in a car accident, right? We put it on because we think if we're in a car accident, it'll be less bad, or maybe not at all, but we know it's not eliminating the risk. It's the same in cyber risk. There's nothing that will eliminate this, but you can be very smart and employ the right tools to lop off the big stuff. Like, if you're, let's go back to just driving. You know, if you fasten your seatbelt, don't text, and maybe stay off I-95, your probabilities of dying in a car probably went down substantially, right? Now, sometimes you got to get on 95, and we realize that, but you're not going to do it without a seatbelt, and you're not going to text when you're doing it, and you're hoping the other guy isn't. It's the same way in cybersecurity. You can meaningfully, and using facts and figures is difficult because this is still a nascent field, and we do a lot of work with data. But I will go out on a limb and feel very safe by saying, if you employ the 4 fundamentals with some greater awareness, you have eliminated 90% plus of the risk that is out there. And I think I'm being conservative, but I don't want to get too far over my skis. This is the empowering piece. We kind of have to fear and shock monger on some level because people don't wake up, honestly, otherwise. But that's not the way we like to leave the room, and that's not the only message we have. We provide solutions that do make a big difference because, look, the internet might be mankind's greatest invention ever, right? the world's knowledge and information at our fingertips, just a remarkable thing. And fear and risk should not get between us and the digital age and all the magic elements of technology in the internet. So we're all about empowering with the 4 fundamentals. And so we'll talk more about the 4 fundamentals, which are really about everybody owns devices, whether it be your smartphone or your laptop or anything in between. Those need to be protected in real time from viruses and ransomware and intruders and data loss. And there are remarkable, again, the last 5 years, the capital that's come into this industry has broken records over and over, and it's early stage capital. And it's the smartest money in the world because it's the growth industry of the future, right? And so the innovation that's coming out is really remarkable, and the innovation we bring to bear to protect devices is like anybody, the best anybody could get anywhere in the world. You also go on the internet. And so we talk about encrypting all of those activities. Fundamental number 2. Fundamental number 3, privatize email, right? Privatize, no free lunch, right? Get your stuff back. Get your stuff back, easy to do. And now you have your own digital domain. It's not theirs, it's yours. And we talk about some documents simply shouldn't be in the cloud. Right? They should be in digital vaults on hard servers. Ted has written a lot about these things. Ted's advice around these things has just been absolutely leading edge and incredibly valuable. And we use it a lot with our customers. So those are the 4 fundamentals. We'll talk more about those in detail tomorrow. And some of my thinking and what I would suggest here, this is a really great book. When Google went public, right, all the 25-year-old billionaires wanted to go public, Wall Street said you need an adult. And so the adult they brought in was Eric Schmidt. So Eric Schmidt is executive chairman of Google. He wrote this book, The New Digital Age. Great book, highly recommended. I took this one quote out of it. There are a lot of them, but I'm trying to punctuate the end of this presentation with it. Identity will be the most valuable commodity for citizens in the future, and it'll exist mostly online. So we've got to learn how to manage that. We've got to teach our kids and our grandkids, right, because they're clueless, aren't they? And there's a good message around that maybe for another time. And so that concludes, with about 3 minutes left for questions, I suppose, John. We're all about cybersecurity for life, okay? And that means it's existential. That means you can do something about it. That means you can be empowered. And I thank the audience in the Total Wealth Symposium very much, and I can take some questions now, John, if that's appropriate.
Let's do one question. We'll save the rest of the questions for the panel. So is there anybody have a question for Brad while he's here? Lori, you have one?
Thank you. My question would be, if we've already used CC Cleaner and other things that may be attracting this attack, is there anything we can do, or will you be addressing that in your workshop?
We will address it in the workshop. Yes, there is something you can do. There's another word for the future called heuristics that looks at behavior of things, and sometimes the behavior is odd enough to identify it, even though it might on the surface look legitimate, and to block it. So there are things to do about that, and it's important to understand.
Thank you.
Okay. Good. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.